Hey friends, I'm Ken Smith, just an old guy having fun with trains, and it's time to start working on the, you gotta be kidding me, trestle. I realize my humor isn't for everybody, but hey, I had to have a little fun with this. The reality is though that we are putting a 4-foot custom designed and built steel trestle right in this general area. This canyon spans roughly about a 6-foot space, but from one end of the bridge to the other end of the bridge is 4 feet and about 2 feet in total height. And so a lot of people like building wooden trestles, and I've been there, I've done that, and I really wanted a spindly looking steel girder bridge. And I realized that I'm also modeling in the 1880s, and the truth be told is that these bridges were built even during that time frame. A good example of that is Devil's Gate Bridge on the now Georgetown Loop, but that bridge was actually part of the Colorado and Southern system that operated there back in the narrow gauge era. And so that is kind of our inspiration for building this. And Micro Engineering, who is our major sponsor for today's video, was gracious enough to supply us with what we felt we were going to need. And we need an awful lot to actually make this bridge kind of work. And so you're going to see several components that we used out of each of their kits in order to really kind of customize this and make it our own. So we'll just kind of take a stand back here just so that you can kind of get a good visual. This is 4 feet from one end to the other, 2 feet high. And if you notice, it's actually at, this is probably a little easier to do it this way. It's a little deeper towards the front and a little further in on that. So if we look down the side, you can kind of see that it's running at a slight angle. Again, kind of going in there just a couple more inches. And you can kind of really see that if you look here. If I were to put my hand here, kind of right there, versus if I were to put my hand here, you can see that there's obviously a lot of room there. So it's running in at a slight angle, which is fine because that's kind of what we wanted to do. We didn't want to have it straight. Again, remember our tiered waterfall is going to kind of come here, and then our water is actually going to exit out here, and we're going to have some sheer rock cliffing back there. So we really think that this is going to be the centerpiece. So let's take a look at all the kits that we're using. So you can see we're actually using 2 of the 210-foot tall steel viaducts. That's what they call them. And we're using 1 height extension kit. We're going to be using this lightweight bridge, and we're actually going to be using sections of it on either end of the bridge. And then we're going to be using this deck girder bridge as one of the sections as well. So that's kind of what we're going to attempt to put together here. Now, one of the things that I want to point out in this particular kit is, at first glance, you might be thinking that this is all one kit, and it's really not. It's actually multiple kits. What you get with the kit is essentially the 2 towers and this section right here is what you get. And so all of these other components have to come from various kits, like this kit right here. And then obviously if you want this taller, you're going to need this. This is going to get us 2 extra sections. My goal is to actually kind of kitbash and add parts of yet another extension, but not a complete base. So in other words, this kind of comes off here, but this stays in place. And this just gives it some added visual effects to it, so that not all of the lines are just perfect and identical. I want some separate lines here where we're letting the water kind of go in between these very two tall structures. The very first step in the instructions for assembling the bridge is actually assembling the bent assembly, which is step 5 right here. Now, what they call for is to remove these little tabs right here, and their instructions recommend to use the microengineering rail nippers, and I strongly encourage that you do that so that you get a nice flush cut. And then you want to lay the bent on top of each other. If you see these tabs right here, that tab right there, that is actually a spacer. So there's an inside and an outside to the bent. And if you take, you'll notice that spacer, when you flip that over, lands on that side. And that's going to give you the spacing that you need. I just kind of want to pick these up so you can kind of see how that works. I'm trying to hold the camera at the same time. But I think you get the idea here. That's actually going to work like a spacer right there. You see that? And that's going to, you're going to want to use something like plastic struck or some other type of styrene glue. You don't want to use CCA. You want to use a styrene glue because you want to melt the plastic together. So we're going to go ahead. I've got a whole lot of these bents to trim off and whatnot, get those flash pieces off, and then we're going to start gluing everything together. We now have our basic bent made, and I went ahead and actually made them all. And what we are into next is actually doing the bent lattice, which is right over here. Now, the sprues are well identified, and it's really easy to figure out what parts go here. And as you follow the instructions, it's pretty simple. Now, in the beginning of the instructions, one thing I definitely do want to point out is that it said that there's extra parts in the kit, depending on how you end up putting the kit together. And but it doesn't say what extra parts there are. And I think I might have figured out at least some of those extra parts. If we look at this a little bit closer, and you look at parts number 6, okay? So just kind of get that visual real quick. And then you come over here and you look at sprue 6 and 7. Okay, so sprue 6 and 7, you'll see parts number 6, which is right here, and then again right here. But the parts also for number 6 are on sprue number 2, right here. And if you notice, this is sprue number 2, and this is sprue number 6 and 7. They're noticeably different. And it kind of stumped me for a little bit, because I'm like, well, when I look at the instructions, the picture right here for bent for number 6, you can clearly see that these tabs on either end aren't there. And so when I kind of hold it up to the inside here, just kind of laying it out like that, it looks like these have to be trimmed to fit. And it kind of alludes to that in the instructions. So I just wanted to share that with you, because that was one of those things that kind of stumped me a little bit, and I didn't want to have you caught off guard. One of the things I will tell you is, when I looked on YouTube, I never really found anybody who explained in detail how this bridge went together. And it can be somewhat intimidating when you open up a box and you see tons, and I do mean tons of parts. But definitely read the instructions, and definitely don't separate anything from the sprues, because that will drive you insane trying to match up all of these parts. Well, the good news is I have all my vents assembled, and I'm still somewhat vacillating back and forth on how I want this to come out. I need 48 inches, and you can see that just by kind of putting pieces together here, I'm pretty close to being there. If we did a single bent at this joint here, that is an option. Although I think what I'm going to end up doing is sectioning this so that this two piece is a little bit longer, or a little bit shorter, I mean. And then if we come over to the other end, kind of extend this out a little bit so that it's a little bit longer. So we put a single bent here, and we put a single bent here. And then that leaves us with 3 of the tower bents here. And I think that that's the way we're going to do that. I still haven't really decided exactly how I'm going to go about this. I might end up just putting a single bent here and then just slightly extending this. I may end up just building the canyon so that the bridge ends up being 46 or 47 inches, and we just shorten the canyon. But that is kind of how things are looking at this juncture. So the next step is we're going to start assembling the towers. Eventually, we need to get our assembly that is kind of bare bones after we've glued them all to look like this. Now, there's a lot of steps that are involved, and I didn't want to bore you with a lot of the details, but I can tell you that once the lattice is installed, it really starts to get rigid. And you can really see it. Up until that point, you're looking at this thing and it feels really flimsy. And it even says that in the instructions. Take your time. I can't stress that enough. Just take your time, match up the parts, make sure everything is fine as you're gluing things together. Another key thing that they mentioned in the instructions was that if you're using the height extension kit, this looks a little different. And so they tell you make sure that you use certain parts if you're going to do the height extension kit. So if you're using the height extension kit, what I'm getting at is that it's not an afterthought. You have to be very purposeful for putting these bents together. Then each of the bents will end up being joined together with these cross braces right here, and they just kind of go in like so. And that's kind of how those go in. And eventually, it'll all build the tower together. Now, unfortunately, while I was doing some of the filming, Microengineering had the height extension kits on back order. And so I kind of stopped during our assembly process and just kind of concentrated on all that I could get. We just got the height extension kits, and we're going to work very diligently to try to get this built as quick as we can. But I have to be honest with you, this is very time consuming, and it's one of those things that you just really got to take your time as you're assembling these, because there's a lot of parts and not something that you want to do in a rush. And while I'm thinking about it, this is my book, and it's available on Amazon. It's A Life Spent Chasing Trains. It's a pictorial book that has over 260 photographs, color photographs, of pictures that I've captured all over the U.S., primarily a lot of narrow gauge stuff, but it is a great book. I'll throw a link down in the description. That finishes up part 1. Have a wonderful day, and you all be blessed.